It's very cheesy to say that something can reverse aging. I get it. Like, those are clickbait thumbnails that are everywhere on the internet. But the one time that we can legitimately say reverses aging is when we're talking about the epigenetic clock in our body. So if you can reverse biological age, that is an arbitrary number that is put in place by various scores. What I mean by that is, if I am 60 years old, which I'm not, but I fooled you for a second. If I'm 60 years old, but my biological age is 40, that means as far as my metabolism is concerned, as far as everything, my cells, my DNA are demonstrating attributes of someone that's 40, even though I'm actually 60. Now, when we look at this particular diet that seems to literally reverse or refresh our epigenetic age, things are really fascinating. I want to pick apart why this might be the case. So if we look at a study that was published in the journal Geroscience, we find that applying Mediterranean principles seems to really have a quick effect. So this study had Polish participants do a Mediterranean-style diet for a year. That's it. For like 1 year, they did an intervention. And after a year, they found that it reversed their epigenetic clock based upon the Horvath score, which is one of many different ways of measuring epigenetic or biological age. They found that it actually rejuvenated their epigenetic age. Now, it varied on the participant, right? But it seemed to actually reverse it a few years at an accelerated rate versus the amount of time they were doing the diet. So if they were doing the diet for a year, it may have reversed their epigenetic age by 5 years or 10 years. Which implies that the longer and stricter we can adhere to Mediterranean principles, the more overall health benefit we can get. Now, where we run into a problem is with a Mediterranean-style diet, it's typically low-ish protein. That's the biggest concern that I have. Now, we have to look at a couple different things. Is your goal to carry a bunch of muscle and be super lean and jacked throughout your entire life? Or is your goal to live a long, healthy life with a lot of energy and have a good health span where you have more energy well into your 80s and 90s? Like, what's your actual goal? I do think that there is a balance to be found here, because one of the reasons people speculate that the Mediterranean diet works so well for longevity is because of the lower protein content. But that also flies in the face of some of the newer research that's suggesting that protein is good for the metabolism and maintaining muscle. So where do we find this balance? Well, with a Mediterranean diet, one thing that's interesting is that they have very specific periods of time in which they eat. Okay, they're not like grazing throughout the course of the day. A lot of times they do sort of a 2-meal-a-day type style diet where they say, okay, we don't really have breakfast. They maybe have some coffee or something for breakfast, and then they eat lunch, and then they eat dinner. And they typically eat a larger meal earlier in the day and taper the calories off as the day goes on. This is tremendously good for metabolism and glucose metabolism in the first place, and just like glycemic control. But the protein equation is where it gets interesting. I think the quality of the protein in a Mediterranean style diet is very important. Okay, they eat good quality lean protein. It's not full of pesticides and full of other garbage. Okay, if you look at a traditional Mediterranean culture and how things are actually harvested in Europe, it's good quality meat. I think that plays a huge, huge part. By the way, I popped a link down below for ButcherBox, which in my opinion has probably the highest quality of meat that you're gonna find. That's at least my opinion of it. It's all grass-fed, grass-finished. So I do think, even though the Mediterranean diet is typically lower protein, I'm a fan of a more moderate protein Mediterranean diet, but by having adequate breaks. I'll explain what that looks like. So I popped the link, it's down below this video in the top line of the description. ButcherBox has grass-fed, grass-finished beef. They have tremendous chicken. They have wild-caught seafood. They have scallops, you name it. Like, their inventory is just growing of different products that they have, but it tastes amazing. I have never tasted grass-fed, grass-finished beef that is this succulent and good. So that link is down below. You have to try their fillets and their New Yorks. Those are definitely my favorite. So that link down below, top line of the description, definitely check them out. It gets delivered to your doorstep too, so it's super easy. So the reason that protein comes into question with aging is because protein spikes what is called mTOR. mTOR and just this entire sort of methylation process that also occurs there seems to be what stands in the way of overall longevity. Like, if we have massive mTOR spikes all the time, we are depleting our bodies. Okay, that's basically draining us. It's basically shortening our clock. But what we also have to look at is that having strategic spikes in mTOR from protein are also very important for cellular recovery. Because if we're just constantly breaking down and we don't have this mTOR balance where we want it, then everything's just going to break down and we'd end up frail and we'd end up never regrowing or recharging or rejuvenating. So the thing that's interesting about the Mediterranean diet is if you do have higher amounts of protein and you have them in this 2 meal a day or even 3 meal a day or even in some cases 1 meal a day fashion, you can have these higher amounts of protein but very specific mTOR spikes where you're not keeping mTOR and insulin elevated all the time. You're keeping it elevated at very defined short periods of time, and then you're having very long breaks. It's almost like accelerated fasting in some ways. Fasting is beneficial because you kick on autophagy, you kick on AMPK, you have all these different cellular recycling processes that occur, and then you have a robust period of time where you spike with a bunch of protein and mTOR and you stimulate recovery and you stimulate insulin and all of this, and that's good for growth and repair. So it's always a balance of recycling and repair, recycling and repair. And my concern is that if you're on a low protein Mediterranean diet is you're always kind of sitting in that low repair stage. You're always in the recycling mode. So that's probably why we see when people add a Mediterranean diet in and they use it as an intervention, briefly we start to see a reversal in epigenetic age and sort of a refresh there. But if they were to continue it for a longer period of time at lower protein levels, it might be detrimental. So we counterbalance this by saying, let's apply what we know about a Mediterranean diet. High amounts of olive oil, high amounts of avocado oil, high amounts of good nuts, macadamia nuts, things like that. High amounts of lean protein versus lower amounts. So add these leaner proteins in, lean fish, lean chicken, and maybe have that be 40% of your nutritional intake. Having this lean protein be a staple and the foundation for your Mediterranean diet might make it so that you get all the benefits of epigenetic age reversal, but you can do it for a longer time and also maintain the physique that you'd like. So what this could look like is applying Mediterranean diets with intermittent fasting and higher protein. 3 or 4 days a week, try intermittent fasting where you skip breakfast or skip dinner or whatever, but increase your protein intake with the meals that you do eat. And that way you're getting more protein, but you're getting it in very defined spikes and not constantly throughout the day. I firmly believe that we have the ability to consume more protein if we can do so in defined periods where our body can assimilate it versus spread out throughout the day where we're chronically in the repair mode and never giving ourselves a chance to get into the recycling mode. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.